we basically concluded that there were so many things that were being mentioned that it would be very hard to accomplish most of the goals, and that we had a lot of difficulty with understanding what was most important, what was less important, how they were going to prioritize the issues. There were a number of issues on it that also seemed to be things that we had at least had conversations about, thinking were not that critical for the CDC's mission. So on a number of fronts, we had some concerns with the 5-year plan, and you know, truthfully, this is the largest expenditure of CFS money in the world. $25 million over 5 years will be spent on this plan. It's a critical adventure that a group of very important researchers are going to be embarking on. So I think that it's critical for us to be sure at this point that we basically feel comfortable with the direction of that plan. And I think what's being said around the table is that there's significant concerns that remain. And actually in the report in 2008, when the Blue Ribbon Plan came out, there was a proviso in there for reviews to continue, and actually there's a time specification of those reviews. So actually what we're saying is nothing different than the 4 external reviewers said.
Well, I did read the 5-year plan, and I personally think it's a good 5-year plan. I think it's almost impossible to attain everything that they put in here. But I think the important thing is, and I think we're on the same page in a sense, in that we want to be sure that the emphasis is placed on the right parts of the plan. And I think that's what, at least that's what I'm hearing you trying to get out.
That's fair.
Yes.
So just have another panel come in and just redo the whole plan. I think it's a waste of time.
No, it's to reevaluate, not redo.
But what you want is the control over the emphasis of where the 5-year plan is going.
To advise.
So how about reevaluate the emphasis?
Cindy hasn't spoke for a
I'm
while.
not sure about the wording, but I think that's where, that's what I'm looking at this. I'm saying, okay, this is all great, and I would love to see all these things done, but it's not going to happen. So what would I like to see really done? I'd like the viral research to be the emphasis, and this the issue about the well sick people to be less emphasized, things like that. And how can we get that across through the Secretary to the CDC that we need to be sure that the CDC is spending the appropriate amount of time, appropriate amount of money in the areas which we deem important, because we are the experts, not them.
I couldn't have said it better, Morris. Cindy.
Cindy, you're next.
I would echo that a little bit, and that is that I think, at least my discomfort with the plan, I think it's it's good ideas in the plan, but it doesn't feel possible. Mm-hmm. And I think the discomfort in this group is that there are not enough specifics, particularly the things that we'd like to see happen aren't happening. And I would like to suggest to the group that instead of saying to revise the whole plan, we have to be very specific about the things we'd like to see happen in the plan. In other words, we should tell them what our priorities would be in terms of being more narrow and accomplishing it. And I'd like to say the second thing that makes me uncomfortable about it is, in the past, broad generalizations that can't actually be met fully. What happens is a small attempt is made at each aspect. For example, I don't know enough about the adolescent study that could come up, but to do a small study of adolescents who are wards of the state, to me, doesn't fulfill our suggestion of improving our knowledge of pediatric CFS. Yet something would have been done, and they can say in the report, this got done.
Right,
so
and I think
the broadness of it means that they can underperform and still meet the recommendations,
but I
and
think
that's a level of discomfort.
The more important, or the fact that what we're uncomfortable with is that the person who is going to be doing this research is going to bend it to the point of research that he wants to do, and not what we want them to do.
Well, can I give another example?
And so the outcomes will be bent or biased to his particular point of view. And by letting the CDC do or by not having the CDC have a protocol that is directed by us, becomes a $5 million
Georgia study.
it becomes a plaything for the person's own research, basically.
As if, and again, just begging clarification here. Remember, this advisory committee advises the secretary. And so, again, to clarify, you're not directing, you're in violation of your charter to
I realize
direct
that.
and control
That's the
CDC. So
wrong
I just want
terminology.
to draw that bright line there to keep you guys out of jail, because we need you.
But
We
Morris,
want the secretary to emphasize where the research should be going.
well, that's a good statement. I think the reason why there was this question of yet another blue ribbon or an external panel is that's probably the only way this committee can influence the process. Advise the secretary to ask the CDC, have another external review of the brand new 5-year plan to help set priorities and emphasis, because we can't do that. We're not allowed to do that as within our charter, but we can advise a mechanism where that might happen.
Can I ask a question?
Can I try this again?
Well, I just want, before you do that, could you read, could we just briefly summarize the first two? Because there is some linkage here, and I just want to see.
Okay, the first one
Yes.
is basically reiterating the recommendation made last time, asking for change in leadership.
Okay.
And
So we're
it's a-
asking very specifically for change of leadership.
Right, and we're citing the New York Times October 13th, 2009 article as
Yes.
a reason. The second one is about case definition.
And
This-
that's important.
The third one, which I've rewritten based on what everyone said, is that we recommend that the secretary emphasize and prioritize the CDC's 5-year plan.
Based on our recommendations.
Within,
Can we say based on our recommendations?
Well, you see, the first two, that's why I asked to have them read. The first two is very clear that, especially the first one, is that our complaint about the 5-year plan is that the plan is a little vague, and if you have someone who has a bias and is the leader of that, it's going to be slanted inappropriately, and that's what we really want to say. And I think we should say what we really want to say. Now, how do you say that? You've already said once we don't like the leadership, that should be changed.
the 5-year plan isn't about the leadership. It's like a beauty contestant saying, I want to solve world hunger. This is a very big, broad statement, and there's no way you can do it all. And so what we're looking for is there needs to be a prioritization of the 5-year plan. And so I think if we ask the secretary to set the priorities or to come to the committee
Process that would set
or some process where there are priorities set.
Okay. I just want to make sure that
that's
we don't,
emphasis.
the secretary may not be able to set those priorities without
Okay.
help. That's number one. Just one more thing. Number two, I apologize once to this group. I did not make that meaning for some health reasons, but also I read that document and I didn't even know how to begin to prioritize it. It's huge and it asks for an awful lot. So anyway, having said that, Len?
Jim, I think that
Jason.
our May recommendation number 2, and it's in section 8 of our packet, if everyone could turn to it, it was extremely articulate, and I think it identified really, and we spent a lot of time on it, what we were looking to have CDC accomplish. And unless our view has changed, we might want to look at that and re-embrace that.
Why don't you read it?
Okay, well, it was the way it was presented was provide adequate funding, and so I think we have $25 million that's been so I'm not sure that we need to say provide adequate funding, but we said this should include but not be limited to immediate progress in these priority areas. Number one, identification of biomarkers and etiology of CFS. Now, do we want to broaden that to take on the XMRV issue?
Yes.
Okay, so now we can sort of amend that to include. Number two, creation of guidelines for adult and pediatric CFS management in full partnership with organizations representing CFS scientific and clinical expertise. That's still a priority of ours, isn't it?
Yes.
So let's reaffirm that. provision of web-based guidelines for CFS